In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives life to all men was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to those who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, or of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Everyone's got a story, and I am convinced that your story is amazing. It's just that some people know how to tell a better story than others. We've been talking a lot about story lately in our time together. We talked about a story of creation. We've talked about the story of the people of God, known as the Israelites. We've kind of come to understand that there's something to a really good story. There's a truth in a good story that doesn't seem to be attached to mere factual accuracy. The truth that's revealed about God seems to come from some other place besides them. And so tonight we're going to talk about the Gospel of John and those first 14 verses of the Gospel of John. John seemed to understand really well how a story could really connect people and the power that's in a good story. And so John wanted to connect Jesus to the readers of his gospel through a really good story. We know that John was really good at telling stories. He had excellent grammar, excellent syntax, excellent story structure. He would have got an A+ in English for sure. There are the first 14 verses in the book of the Gospel of John that are a prologue to John's story. And so much like a prologue in Shakespeare, these first 14 verses tell us the whole story right from the beginning. In this prologue, John is connecting Jesus to a deep philosophical undercurrent in Greek thought. The word that is translated word is logos. And logos can be translated a bunch of different ways depending on the context. But the idea here is that the logos is the thing that connected all the things. It's the thing that allows understanding. And a human being's ability to access the logos is what kind of separates us from other animals. It's the underlying logic and order of the whole universe. And so John does a lot of things, a lot of really kind of mind-blowing things in these first 14 verses. So first of all, he connects the idea of God to the logos. The phrase "in the beginning" should be familiar to you guys because it's the way that Genesis starts. And so John is immediately connecting the idea of creation and the story that comes with creation to the story of Jesus. John says that this logos has come into the world and that it can be experienced by you and me. But most importantly, John says that this logos became a human being. The deep, mysterious order of the universe can be known in a personal way. John is saying in no uncertain terms that when we see Jesus, we see God. But what does that even really mean? One of the central tenets throughout the entire history of Christianity is the idea of the Trinity, that God is three in one. And somehow we have to struggle and grapple with the idea that God became not God. God became a human while still at the same time remaining God. Jesus was, is, and will always be 100% God. But Jesus was, is, and will always be 100% human. And so the thinkers of the church have kind of struggled with ways to make this easier to understand or easier to manage. But we should know by now, in our adventure together, that God cannot and will not be managed. So I want to ask you that question again, but in a different way. What does that mean for us as we journey together and as we follow this Logos, as we follow Christ? So here's my suggestion. Jesus cannot be followed or merely understood as an idea or a set of beliefs or some sort of moral checklist. Jesus can only be followed as a story. And I want to be clear here, and I want to make sure that you guys understand what I'm saying. I am not trying to imply in any way that Jesus is not real. I don't mean to say story is something that may or may not have happened. None of this Christianity stuff works unless Jesus was actually born, actually grew up, actually died, and actually came back from the dead. And so what I mean to say here is that Jesus is the story. Jesus is the single event at the center of not only human history, but of the entire history of the universe. And so the entire life of Jesus then, the incarnation of Jesus, cannot be for us a moral checklist. It is not and cannot be a series of do's and don'ts. It is not a line in the sand or a boundary that determines who's in and who's out. On the contrary, the life of Jesus becomes our life. The story of Jesus becomes our story. We are drawn to Jesus, and as we draw closer to Him, our story starts to look more and more like Jesus' story. Our stories begin to look alike. And in that process, we participate more and more with God in God's story. It's not about who's in or who's out. It's not about what we did or didn't do or if we were good enough. It's simply about us being drawn to God and participating with God in God's story.